I will now present to you Andréane Martel, who's the National Program Director for Spur Change, so that she can say a few words about our program. Thank you for being here today, Andréane.
Bonjour, bonsoir à tous et à toutes.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining, especially those who are on the east side of the country or even those joining from outside of Canada, as it is becoming late for you. So thanks to be here. Donc, merci de vous joindre à nous pour le premier événement que nous organisons
Thank you for
spécialement
joining
pour
us
les
for this
enseignantes et les
first
enseignants
event
qui
organized
s'intéressent et
specifically
s'impliquent
for
dans
the
l'éducation à la
teaching
citoyenneté
staff
mondiale.
who's interested in
Certains
global
d'entre vous
citizenship
connaissez
education.
notre programme, le
Some
programme
of you
Activer
already know
Changement, en
our
raison de nos
Spur
activités de
Change
partage des
program because of
connaissances
our
auprès
skill
de petites et
sharing
moyennes
activities
organisations de solidarité
with
internationale. Donc, le
PMOs
premier encadré que vous
and
voyez sur
international
l'écran.
cooperation organizations. So this
On a
this
cependant
first
tout un
square
pan
that
de
you
nos
see on the
activités
screen,
sur
but a
l'éducation à la
whole part of
citoyenneté
our
mondiale.
activities
Ces
in
activités
global
incluent le programme
citizenship
Jeunes Leaders, par
education that
exemple, qui a
also
réuni cette
include
année
Youth
17
Leader
jeunes provenant de 11
program,
pays
who
différents,
has
mais aussi tout
trained
un pan
18
sur
youth from
l'engagement des
all around the
enseignantes,
world this year.
enseignants
And
et
we
des
also have
communautés
a whole
scolaires sur les
part
questions de
about
citoyenneté
youth
globale.
training
Nous avons par
on
ailleurs
global
annuellement
citizenship.
une conférence qui
We
réunit
have a
le milieu de
yearly
l'enseignement et
conference
les
that
organismes de
brings together
coopération
the teaching
internationale
milieu
pour
and
discuter
global
des questions
collaboration
qui les passionnent
sectors so
et
that
qui
they
les
can talk
partagent.
about
Cette année, cette
passionate
conférence-là
issues that
aura
they
lieu au
can
mois de
share.
mars
This
2021.
conference will be taking place in March
Donc, c'est dans
2021
ce
this
cadre
year.
que l'événement aujourd'hui se tient. Je vais laisser
So it's
Sébastien
important
présenter un peu plus en
that
détail
we have
l'événement ce
this
soir et nos
conversation
panélistes.
today, and I'm going to
Mais
let
avant de vous céder la
Sebastian
parole,
say
je
a
veux juste
few
dire
more
quelques
words
mots
about
sur le
our
programme Activer
agenda today, but
Changement.
I still
Donc,
want to
d'abord, c'est un programme de
present
5 ans qui
Spur
est
Change
financé
program. It's
par
a
Affaires
5-year
mondiales
program
Canada.
financed by
Les
Global
membres de
Affaires
l'équipe
Canada,
d'Activer Changement se
and
situent à plusieurs
the team
endroits à travers
members
le
are
Canada.
spread
Donc, dans la
across
ville de Québec,
Canada.
Sherbrooke,
So we have
Toronto,
people in Quebec,
Edmonton.
Sherbrooke,
Pour ma
Toronto,
part, je suis
Edmonton,
située à Montréal, sur les
and
territoires
I
non
myself
cédés de la
I
nation
am in
Kanien'kehá:ka.
Montreal
D'ailleurs, si
on
vous le souhaitez,
unceded
je vous
territory of
encourage à nommer dans le chat
Kanien'kehá:ka
les territoires sur
territory.
lesquels vous vous trouvez.
And if it's possible for you, I
Notre
encourage you
équipe
to
est affiliée au
name
Conseil
the
albertain de coopération
native
internationale basé à
people's lands that
Edmonton,
you are
mais on
on.
travaille en étroite collaboration avec
We
les 7
work
autres conseils
closely with the
provinciaux et régionaux de
7
coopération
provincial and
internationale à
regional
travers le Canada. Ils ont
councils
d'ailleurs
of
aidé dans
RCCs
la
around
diffusion de
Canada,
cet événement, donc
and
j'en
they have
profite pour les
greatly helped
remercier.
in today's
Et puis
webinar
donc sur ce, je vous remercie de votre
organization.
participation en direct ou
And
via
thank you for
l'enregistrement. Et je
participating,
repasse donc la
whether
parole à
through the
Sébastien en vous
recorded
souhaitant une bonne
version
soirée.
or in the live version. And up to you now, Sebastian. Thank you, Andréane. We have received a question in the chat box about how can we mute the original language when you're hearing the interpretation. So if you click on the interpretation again, there is an option for you to mute the original recorded version. So sorry, not the recorded version, but the live original version. So it'll be easier if you're following up with the interpretation option.
The original audio when you are hearing the interpretation. If you press on interpretation, again, you can choose to mute the original language. Donc aujourd'hui, notre webinaire a pour objectif de susciter.
Today's webinar is meant to spark a conversation about how different global citizenship education models respond to today's challenges during the COVID pandemic.
Les meilleures pratiques, les innovations et les lacunes en nous inspirant des expériences locales et internationales. Pour ce faire, nous comptons avec un panel de discussion internationale. Premièrement, je voudrais leur remercier de leur participation, puisque ce sont.
So thank you so much for your participation, because we know it's a hard time for teaching in the teaching section, and we know you are situated in different parts of the world. Following up on our presentations, we will have a 20-minute Q&A session, and you are greatly encouraged to share your questions and comments in the chat box. Our first panelist today is Marta Estéllez, doctor, PhD at the Social Universities of Spain in Cantabria, qui nous partagera quelques outils de participation, who will share participation in global issues from her perspective. Thank you, Marta. It's up to you now.
Thank you very much. Good evening for those of you who are in Quebec right now, and good morning or afternoon for those of you who are in other parts of the world. Can you hear me well? Okay. And thank you very much, Sebastian and the Sport Change team, for inviting me to participate in this webinar about the future of global citizenship education after this pandemic. I am very glad to be here with you today and contributing to this debate that I think it is so necessary right now, because at the beginning of this pandemic, we were all so shocked with such an unprecedented situation that we just wanted to create a new normality that was as close as possible to our previous normality. And I mean, this is completely understandable because we are all humans and we all need good amount of certainty to operate. But in many cases, and as graffiti, oh, this is the next slide, Sebastian. Thank you. But in many cases, and as graffiti in a subway station in Hong Kong, we can't return to normal because the normal that we had was precisely the problem. And at least to some extent, and this is also true in educational terms, it is understandable that the first educational response was focused on how to minimize the impact of school closures. But the COVID-19 educational crisis implies much more than a disruption that should be solved with through distance learning models. And now that we have somehow passed that first shock, we should start thinking of much bigger pedagogical challenges that this pandemic has posed. And this is when, for me at least, this is when it comes global citizenship education. So this is the next slide. Oh. Thank you. So this is when it comes global citizenship education for those educators concerned with global citizenship education. This pandemic has profound implications for various reasons. Firstly, because it has highlighted how deeply embedded national identities are within us, even for those of us who hate to hear that slogan from our political opponents of our country first. Secondly, because we have never been so aware of the need of global cooperation. For the first time, a global issue requiring global cooperation has impacted, or so profoundly impacted, the day-to-day lives of most people in the world. Thirdly, because we are witnessing every day how this pandemic has exacerbated existing inequalities and privileges. It has widened social and economic divisions. And finally, because whether we like it or not, we will have to face the troubled times ahead with sustainability issues, the reshaping of globalization, tensions between freedom and security, and so forth. And if we look at the most popular definitions of global citizenship education, this the next slide. I show in the next slide, I show, oh, sorry, the next one. Thank you. I brought here the one developed by UNESCO because it has been so powerful, inspiring educators and scholars from all over the world. And all these definitions usually talk about things like interconnectedness, global awareness, global empathy. But my point here is that, well, of course, I agree with all these beautiful words, but I think that these beautiful words of global citizenship education are not enough in a post-COVID world. And in particular, I think they are not enough to face the previously mentioned challenges, the challenge of nationalism, of global cooperation, of inequality, and of the future ahead. Can you please change the, thank you. During this pandemic, we have always witnessed that nationalism has been present in several responses to this crisis, from border closures and the calls to return home from most countries, through to this competition for medical supplies and the vaccine and so on. And of course, this is not just an educational challenge, but part of it is an educational challenge. And in educational terms, this challenge is not only about including global perspectives or international understanding or promoting cultural awareness in schools. Schools need also to rethink the subtle and not so subtle ways in which we reinforce and those feelings and narratives of my country first. And through analyzing the curriculum or the teaching content taught, the values, the silenced voices, and so on. And this means that we need to deeply rethink the school curricula in these terms. Also, this is this next slide, please. During this pandemic, the inability of countries to articulate a global response has become more obvious than ever. Of course, global citizenship education models include this challenge among their purposes. Most global citizenship education models include this challenge among their purposes, but they usually do it from a very individual perspective. That is this idea of empowering individuals to solve global issues. But what COVID-19 has highlighted is that the problem is not only that individuals were not able to imagine or carry out forms of cooperation with other citizens in the world, but in fact that governments and international organizations are not doing a very good job in this regard either. So it is not only about fostering youth participation in global issues, which is great, and not all global citizenship education programs promote, by the way, but it's also about demanding more global responses from our governments and critically analyzing the limitations and non-democratic nature of multilateral and international organizations. And I think in this regard, there are some historical precedents to be slightly optimistic in this moment. So, for example, if we look at 100 years ago, after the influenza and the First World War, came the League of Nations, and after the Great Depression came the welfare state, and after the Second World War came the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And actually currently we are seeing some more awareness about the need of global cooperation and public infrastructures to protect us in health, social welfare, and so on. But of course, history does not follow a linear progress. So global citizenship education should focus more on the actions of governments and international organizations, and in some sense, stop pointing the individuals as the main responsible for solving global problems. Also, and this is the next slide, thank you. Now that this pandemic has exacerbated pre-existing inequalities, it is even more urgent to rethink school curricula in these terms. And I think it is necessary to rescue the idea of schools as a means of compensating social inequalities. So very often global citizenship education promotes this very paternalistic engagement with marginalized populations and the so-called third world, reinforcing ethnocentric views. So again, I think we should rethink school curricula in these terms. And finally, the challenge of, this is next slide, the challenge of the future ahead, which, whether we like it or not, will force us to ask tough questions and make tough decisions. And we need to learn how to make such questions and such decisions. And well, I'm talking about the dilemmas about technology, for example, privacy versus security, the rise of authoritarian populism, the sustainability and ethicality of our lifestyles, and so on. And these are all controversial and difficult questions that global citizenship education very frequently tends to avoid. So I think we need to recuperate this idea of schools as public spaces where public affairs can be discussed and where we can radically reflect upon the consequences of our acts. And I just hope that, this is the next slide, where I show one photo of one of the pedagogical utopias of the beginning of the 20th century. And well, for me, I just hope that these challenges that I previously mentioned, these 4 challenges, will help to shape our post-COVID-19 pedagogical utopias. It doesn't matter if we call them global citizenship education or any other beautiful name. Thank you very much for listening, and I am looking forward to this debate and to listening to the other speakers. But if in particular you are interested in some of the ideas that I just talked, my colleague and I just, Gustavo Fishman, just published a couple of articles that I left the references there, and they are open access, so we'll be happy to share them. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Martha. Je tiens à mentionner
Thank you so much, Marta. I just want to say that there is a French translation of these 2 articles, and they were published on the website of Spur Change. So it's also been shared in the invite email to this webinar. So since you had to register to be here, you must have received them. We will share them again next week, and we will also share the recording of this presentation along with the links that were shared with it from different panelists. So thank you again, Marta. And now we will go to our second panelist, Alison Fritz, Bell High School, and the English School Commission, teacher in French immersion, but she will speak in English today. And she is also a mentor for National Geographic and ambassador for International Work Network. And she will share her perspective from her experience on the field. Thank you so much, Alison, for taking the time today, and I'll give to you the mic for 10 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. I will promise to do my best to stay in English. Marta, you have given me so many thoughts that have kind of shifted a little bit about what I want to share today. But I want to share first, this is what sort of my classroom looks like, and I'm coming to you from our learning space. This is not how my brain or the learning picture I wish for my students to be in terms of rows. From my personal experience so far, this has been a huge learning curve to kind of go backwards in some ways, but in the same sense, reflect on what education is like around the world. And when I say backwards, it's because I have been so used to doing collaborative work and table work and very independent instant feedback where you are working simultaneously with students so closely to be able to navigate their learning, be it at a local, regional, or global level. So having a room set up like this, it makes me think about when Marta was saying how different schools and thinking about the inequalities in our world. I have felt very lucky that this is still my space, and there is still so much in this space for students to learn with and from. Next slide. As an educator, though, when I think about COVID-19 and global teaching and responsible planetary stewards and citizenship, such an important part where COVID-19 has actually created a stronger opening, I think, for educators, is getting our students outside. I'm speaking from a lot like what my perspective is and experience has been this year, recognizing that this isn't an opportunity that all schools have, or students, no matter where you may be in the world. But having the opportunity to remind students that being outside is a really great place for them to be for their own health and safety is outstanding, not to mention their mental health. I think that's one of the things that when I think about the global competencies right now and understanding the world around us, that has me sometimes a little bit nervous for my students. They're overwhelmed right now. They're worried. They don't know how to articulate their worry as young adolescents. They're grade 7 and 8s, and they don't want to worry their parents, their families sometimes. So I don't always see, I can sense, but I can't always see what that worry is. So to bring upon them some of the statistics and numbers associated with COVID-19 and some of the complexities of our world can really put some of them in a very discomforting position. And that's not a bad thing per se, but there's a different approach that I'm taking this year towards global competencies and how I try my best to find the hope in our world and to see how maybe our world can come together through more communication. And that means taking my students outside more to appreciate their own backyard so that when they understand that they can love the local area that they're in, if they get the chance to travel to another global area, no matter their setup, that they will have respect for that area. They will have an understanding of how somebody is super passionate about their backyard and wanting to make it better, to make it safer, to make it great for the generations behind them. Next slide. So this is something I would have done pre and post COVID-19 and getting our students outside exploring, looking at things at a micro level, at a cellular level, drawing and sketching. Next slide. And I'm bringing this back because we're outside more, and I'm going to flip back to what I said before. This is classroom cleanup, COVID-19. No, those things aren't going into the garbage that you see in the trash can, but coming in this year, we were told, like many educators across the world, you need to make your classroom, your learning space, bare bones. And so I'm going to admit that I was in tears at one point because I was thinking about all of the great things that I would normally do with my students that I no longer had the option to do because I was limited now in what things I could create with them, for them. And it took me a solid 4 days to create what you see in behind. You can't see the whole thing, but it's a lot less than what it used to be. But then I think again about, haven't shared this yet with my students, I allude to it, there's so many classrooms that do not have what we have. Every student in my class right now has access to technology. Our internet sometimes is a little bit wonky, but we still have that, and we're finding creative ways to be able to express our learning. We may want to skip that to the next slide. That one's a little overwhelming. But this is what it looks like now, and this is how I set up my year for my students. So here's their desks. They have workbooks again. They had them before. They have markers. They have clipboards actually now. And we're doing a lot of collaborative work that one student actually brought up saying, hey, madame, this reminds me of something that I saw. I don't remember the country, but this is how they're learning. And I said, yeah, in some ways, we're linking to other schools from around the world in terms of some practices that would be shunned in some ways by some, but yet are the option that people have with what they've got. And so recognizing right now in a COVID-19 time, our learning can happen in any manner, in any way, and to celebrate learning in every instance that it brings us. And so though maybe some of our pedagogical approaches have changed, linking our understanding of our learning to how other students learn around the world is kind of important right now, and recognizing learning as learning. Next slide. So this is a pre-COVID-19 photo where you can see I was very used to having round tables, very, very tight discussions with students about what they're learning. But when I think about global competencies with students during these times and in the future, I see the opportunity to do things like what we're doing right now. It's opening up a door wherever possible to have Zooms, Google Meets, and to talk to experts in their various domains to learn about what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're making the planet a better place. This is actually from an organization called Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. And an amazing photographer, a National Geographic explorer, Jenny Adler, is sharing with us about her voyages around the world, learning about sponges, learning about underwater issues, and how we can be better. Students get excited when they talk to experts. And so that's something that I hope will maybe be opened up to people during these COVID-19 times, recognizing that our classrooms are not limited to these four walls or even to the door outside of us to take us out into the yard where possible. We can bring the world into our rooms to better understand what it is we can do at a local and global level to make the world a better place. To remind kiddos that every little action they take in a day to make someone smile, to make the day better for somebody else, by picking up a piece of plastic, by not using a plastic, those are all things that can make the world better. And those global competencies, that idea connected to the Sustainable Development Goals, is achievable by our students. Next slide. So it's amazing though to think about, and going back to what Martha said, thinking about quality of life around the world. Thinking about quality of life and not putting judgment on it is so important right now, because I want my students to understand just your experience is your experience, and to undermine what another community looks like around the world is what we want to avoid. So when we're researching other countries, when we're looking at statistics and trying to find the good and try to understand the history, I want my students to know during these times and in the future that this is what we work towards understanding, to understand the culture, the community that they may not yet know due to their own personal experience. To understand that not everyone has had the same upbringing, and that it's important for them to value what they've gone through in their life, and not put judgment on anybody else's upbringing and things like that. To celebrate the fact this is what makes our world a wonderful place, is our differences, and how can we elevate each other in each of these situations to make everybody's life that much better. It's a very utopian view, but I think when we understand another country and try to look towards people to share their experiences from said country, said region, our students can be better prepared to be effective planetary stewards, global citizens today and tomorrow. Next slide. So this is kind of a roundabout way to explain, and this is not winter right now here in Ottawa, although I'm pretty sure the snow might be coming soon. These kiddos are smiling, you can kind of see it. And when I think about what we want our students doing, especially the young ones, is getting them excited about what's around them, getting them passionate, getting them curious, encouraging their questions, making sure their mental health and well-being is in check. And if that means taking them outside more than not and thinking about their well-being, what I have seen happen with my students, both now and hopefully post-COVID-19, is that when they go to, let's say, La Ville de Québec, Quebec City, they're going to appreciate that community because they love their own. My ultimate hope, with a couple seconds left, is that at the end of all of this, as we go into a new norm, whatever that may look like, or the norm, is that educators are highlighting their local region to be celebrated amongst their students, to see how they can elevate it, how they can be passionate about it, because when they feel the passion about where they're from, that passion can carry over to another place with respect for the other place, because somebody else has been in those shoes trying to develop a passion for that region. I hope that everyone's staying health and safe and healthy, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup, Alison.
Thank you, Alison. I just want to say that Alison will probably have to leave us earlier than later, because she's in her classroom, and at the end of every day, there's the whole process of disinfecting and cleaning that is happening, and it makes teachers have to leave at a certain time, so we don't want to keep her any longer. Thank you for your participation, Allison. And if we have any questions specifically towards you, we will keep them in mind and we will communicate them to you later on, so that we can have access to your answers and your thinking. Thank you so much, Allison, for this testimony, and thank you for your participation in Spur Change since the start. Our third panelist is Tanya Sanchok. And I'm sorry, I feel like those are the risk of live presentations. I'm sorry, the next the next panelist is Girma Shermis. And I want to mention that Girma has just received a PhD in political and citizenship education. So congrats, Girma, for that great achievement.
Thank you very much.
He has also participated in the Youth Leaders for Change program, and he will share his perspective from his ground. It's up to you, Girma, for 10 minutes, and thank you for your participation today.
Thank you very much. For those who doesn't know me, yes, I'm Girma from Ethiopia. I am a senior education officer at Partners in Education Ethiopia. Our organization was established by kind-hearted Canadian individuals, Gina Kosko and David Kosko, who understand global citizenship education earlier. I have to take this opportunity to thank these individuals, including Gina and David. First of all, I want to appreciate Canadian people and the government for sharing from what you have two humans in the other corner of the world. Small or big, your contribution is changing someone's life here in Ethiopia, of course, in other developing nations too. I would like to thank organizers of this webinar being concerned about the global citizenship, focusing on education. And thank you, Sebastian, for the chance to air my views. Thank you, Marta, for this wonderful presentation. And I also appreciate the first panelist reflection. I want to start from being human. Just as humans, we have a common denominator. Both issues of global citizenship and global citizenship education are interlinked ideas that require understanding how we are living as a system. Our world is a complex adaptive system. Complex in a sense that it's interdependent and interlinked, and our system is also an adaptive. We learn and change ourselves. So as global citizens, we need to work on issues like poverty, gender equality, conflicts, human rights, environmental conditions, social justice, and so on. Because directly or indirectly, we face with the spillover effects of we are living in the same globe, so we share all these problems. Let me start from the saying of one Indian poet. This Indian poet said that world will end in ice. From his last written, we find the sentence that says world will end in ice. We can extract two meanings from this statement. One thing, the iceberg will melt and vanish the world, and the second thing, excessive I or individualism, kind of selfish act will be a danger for this world. So the poet is trying to say that if we keep on being selfish and focus on individualistic life, of course, such kinds of lifestyle is being reflected in our system, our beliefs. We believe on the survival of the fittest. Even our recent experience, the bid to own the vaccine that we have seen from Trump, the Chinese, it shows us to what extent we are being individualistic and being governed by a nationalistic feeling. So therefore, understanding this interdependency and complexity, is the first point to step, the first important step to learn and change in the complex adaptive world. So as Marta noted, COVID-19 doesn't brought only negative impacts, it also shows us how we are interconnected and the need to collaborate to survive and thrive in this rapidly changing world. So as global citizens, we need to admit that we have a lot in common and we have a lot to share. So as I said, beyond understanding how we are interconnected, it's also important to be open for learning and sharing, just like how we are doing now. So similarly, governments, international organizations, as Marta pointed out, should promote global understanding and unifying principles in their policies and practices. Marta also pointed that we need to cultivate students' rational and humanitarian values. It doesn't mean that we need to suppress their cultural and national identities. So our education must include content that promotes altruistic nature, global challenges, social justice, environmental impacts, and others that we share in common. So we need to strengthen digital learning and independent learning approach with proper guidance. This is also important in this global dynamic and changing environment. Moreover, I don't think our confined concrete cement classroom blocks are convenient anymore for learning as it limits freedom to explore. Just as you have seen from the previous presentation, just students are learning outside the classroom, moving here and there. Such kinds of freedom should be allowed. It's something that we dictated from the effects of COVID-19. Therefore, I feel that talking about global citizenship education on one hand helps to strengthen the concept of being a global citizen, and on the other hand, it gives us a chance to specifically share how our education system is responding to COVID-19. Just to share you some aspects how we are trying to cope with the COVID-19 effects in our education system. I can start. Our government strongly believes that education should be pursued with proper care. In some places where the prevalence of COVID-19 is high, the government poses restrictions. It should be delayed. The start of education should be delayed. This is the guidance of the government. Specifically, in most schools, we have prepared steering committees to respond to the to respond early to COVID-19 symptoms and implement further activities. And these steering committee is also responsible to create awareness on the preventive measures. Even in classroom sessions, just issues of COVID-19 is being included, like other issues related to having a balanced diet to protect, to have a better immune, just taking spicy foods, drinking lots of water, just sufficient water, I mean, and drinking hot drinks. All these are parts of the awareness creation mechanisms. And the awareness creation also includes using face mask, social distancing, and hand washing, as well as sanitization. So related with using a face mask, the government gives serious attention to this issue, and the government is distributing nearly 50 million face masks to all government schools, so that every student can get this benefit. There is also an attempt to have pedal hand wash stations, so that students can wash their hands and clean themselves. There is also using infrared thermometers to screen just early screening of individuals who might be infected by COVID-19. So at this point, I have to appreciate the works of Operation ICT and Wild Design Foundation including ICE, for their support to our target schools. Just in such occasions, we need to appreciate such kinds of organizations who stand beside us. There is also social distancing that we are using as a measure. Like most schools in developing nations, we also have 70 to 19 students per classroom. This is it's large class size. So the only option that we can do is dividing students in 3 shifts. And as the government put as a standard, 25 to 30 people are in one classroom. Perhaps it creates extra burden on teachers. We also try to introduce outdoor classrooms to exercise social distancing, as well as to promote authentic learning, just connecting with the environment. There is also an attempt to include digital learning in the education system. Yeah, as you all know, it's difficult to access all digital materials in a nation, in developing nations. So these are some of the mechanisms that we are using to respond to and to go with COVID-19. The limitations that we have is the quality of education might be compromised. You see, previously we have been struggling to provide quality education, and currently teachers may get over busy. Just even in some schools, teachers hold about 30 credit hours, and they are responsible to teach 30 credit hours a week. And just to what extent it's difficult to implement active student-centered and authentic kind of learning in such situations. This is a kind of a limitation that we have currently. And there is also a reluctancy of following safety procedures among the students in the community. As you might have heard, the impact of COVID-19 here in Ethiopia, in Africa, is very, very little, just thanks to God. Just the death rate is just nearly 1.5%, and the death rate, the COVID-19 is seriously affecting individuals who are above the age of 60 years, and about 92% cases do not show any COVID-19 symptoms. So within all these situations, there is some kind of reluctancy among individuals to follow strict procedures. Anyhow, just we are trying to go with it, to live with COVID-19 in our educational institutions. And at the end, I want to forward some ideas for Marta. Time.
Irma? We are on time, but
I suggest that Marta
ask you
in their
later
presentation,
in the question
in their
answer,
article,
if you could
I think they have to
address
be
some
more
comments
specific and
to
prescriptive
Marta
at
in that
how
moment. That
this
would be
global
best,
citizenship
so we can
education can
have
be
Tanya's
developed more,
perspective,
can be
and then we
implemented,
can move
and
to
it requires
exchanges.
specificity.
Does it work?
That's how I understand. And the other point is there must be a balance, like global cooperation, the improved role of the government, and there must be improved role of international organizations. Just like this, individuals should have a stake, should have a role, so that global citizenship education can be implemented effectively. That's how I perceive. Thank you, Sebastian.
I have to apologize that I spoke at the same time than you, Girma. I think I had a connectivity issue and I thought you had finished. So maybe I can, we will move on to Tanya, but then Girma, you can also—
Sebastian, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. I couldn't hear you a few moments ago. So I'm sorry that I interrupted you without wanting to. On the first part of your comment to Marta's presentation.
Hello.
Yes, so Girma, could you repeat the first question that when I interrupted you? First question to Marta.
Hello.
Yes, Girma, we hear you. Marta, do you hear Girma?
I just heard last part of his second question because the first one, you and him were talking at the same time, so I couldn't hear it very well. But yeah, could you repeat that part? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Marta, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my first suggestion is trying to be more specific. Just in order to improve global citizenship education, just you need to set some kind of specific guidelines that can be implemented at the individual and at the organizational as well as at the nationwide level, so that organizations, individuals, and nations can easily pick and implement issues that can promote global citizenship. That's my first suggestion. And the second one is giving balance. From your article, I have seen that just focusing on individuals and individuals' responsibility is something that's the old approach. And you tend to come to focus on the role of international organizations and government corporations, if I'm not mistaken. So I feel that there must be a balance. We individuals have a role in global citizenship, and specifically in global citizenship education, and the governments have their own stake. International organizations have their own stake. So your article should brought some kind of balanced views. That's my opinion, anyways.
Thank you, Girma. Marta, could you keep your thoughts for a moment so we can jump to Tanya's presentation, and in the question and answer period, Marta can react on what Girma said. I would like to apologize again to Girma. I had an interruption on my internet, and that's why we spoke at the same time. Sorry, everyone, that's the dangers of being direct. Donc, maintenant, je voudrais présenter notre troisième panéliste, Tanya Sanchok.
I will now present to you our third panelist, Tanya Sanchok, who is teaching at the Merely Bourgeois in Montreal. And she is involved with the Cœur des Altruistes, with citizens involved in global citizenship education. She will be able to provide us with her experience on the field. So Mike, is up to you, Tanya, for 10 minutes. Yes, I put my timer on, so I'll try to respect the time. Tanya Sanchok. Before I was teaching, I was a legal advisor working with immigration law, and now I am now teaching to children from 7 to 8 years old. So I'm going to try to touch more on the pragmatic approach that we can use in our classroom to connect our kids to their local community and also to the international community, so that we can bridge links between generations. So I am still going to present the Cœur des Altruistes shortly. 1 year ago, myself and some other people have launched the Cœur des Altruistes, which is an international movement of socially responsible and a political citizenship. We are collaborating with countries of Africa, Latin America, and Europe. We like to have simple projects that can be easily adapted to different contexts around the world. So those are initiatives that are easily attainable. So we use what we have in our heads and what we have around us, And we are a huge network of interhuman connections, and we also exchange ideas, projects, and we get people to meet amongst each other around the world. So this is a really large skill sharing network, intergenerational project as well. We have members from 20 to 50 years in this network around the world. So we do have a member fee, but all you need to be is an involved citizen, so that you can give full swing to our creativity. We are not funded by any private corporation or instance, and so we are truly free, both in action and in thought. So you can write to us at this email address here. And if you go to the next slide, you can also reach us through Facebook and LinkedIn. So the reason why I'm telling you about the Cœur des Altruistes is because in my classroom, I use this project to bridge relationships internationally between students from here and around the world. So I'm just going to give you a few examples. I can't go in too much depth, but I can at least touch a couple words on what we've been doing. We have a friendship all around the world that we are doing with Future Afrique. Those are people from the Ivory Coast, and this is a very young project that we're just starting now. We have youth from here, young teenagers from here, and it's not my class specifically, but it's still students that are in high school all through to university, and we pair them up together so that they can pen pal and see each other through Zoom or video conference, and they can exchange on each other's cultures, talk about their studies, and etc. Because of COVID-19, it really brings us really quickly in the teaching domain to pair long distance teaching and in-presence teaching. So here we have a COVID-19 case in our class, and we have to close the school in 30 minutes, and that is for 14 days. We then go on to online formulas. So those are the policies in my personal school. So we are terribly connected with people around the world, and so this project that we have with the Ivory Coast helps us break isolation, breaks prejudice, and it also helps combat ignorance that brings about prejudice. So this is an encouragement for students to get to know each other and to think about what unites them rather than what divides them. So that's the project that I'm doing with Amitié aux Quatre Coins du Monde with Future Afrique. We also have a pairing program with students from the Togo, with my friend Rai, who's in Togo right now. It's a Muslim school that is paired up with an orphanage. So part of these students have no parents, and they go to this school in a school where there's 100 students, sorry, for two teachers. So it's really different from here, where we're usually one teacher for 19 to 20 students. So we paired up students with from Togo and City Chamba, and we do Zoom conference so that our students can see each other and learn songs, sing together in a choir with United Kids. So we write on walls. There's a bunch of songs that United Kids do, and we redo them. So all the schools around the world know these songs, and they are so enthusiastic. We also had last year with our second grade classes, they showed us how they prepare couscous. So we saw kids prepare fire in their school backyard, chomp all the traditional couscous plant, and we see them prepare it from scratch, and it's also a great learning process for our kids. And we also write traditional paper letters that we send through the mail. Today our kids don't know what it is to have a paper letter and to really receive it with a stamp on it. So they get letters and they can send a reply, and they have a chance to maybe receive one of the only handwritten letter that they'll ever have to their own name. So this is a way that we bridge relationships with students from City Chomba in Togo, between students of 7 to 8 years old. With our students, we also have this activity that we did last year, and we're going to do it again. While we were confined, our schools were closed. The whole province of Quebec, or especially in Montreal, we were completely shut out. It was a complete lockdown. So we kept teaching in this context, but on Zoom or on other web conferences applications. But this year, our students are going to go through the same process, is because they write letters for older people, for our elders in long-term care homes, and I send them through email or Gmail, whatever. And when they get to the old age homes, the nurses can go and read the letters to their people that are that are under care over there, and the students can have interactions with them. We also write letters to Saint Justine Hospital, who are in terminal care. And it's difficult during COVID-19 for parents to go see their children. It was very, very strict, especially in the first wave. And at that moment, I had my class write funny or fantastic stories to kind of distract these kids at the hospital and have them give a smile or a laugh in their last moments. So we were collaborating with local nurses so that our students could write, and they're going to do it again this year. And so it was the nurses who could read the letters to the kids in the hospital. So those are moments that are very touching. But to me, what's most important is that my students learn to be socially active citizens that can see that their actions and their words, it does have an impact, because even though they're so young, they do have a role to play in helping others and in getting engaged in their community, and to be a socially involved citizen, even though they're young. They also wrote a letter to our premier, François Legault, while the pandemic, while we were in complete lockdown in April or May, and they wrote their comments to the Prime Minister, their questions, their worries, and their solutions about COVID-19. So they took a stance as a citizen, and they do have hesitations and questions, and so they wrote directly to the the Prime Minister, and we sent it to their political representant. And we know that François Legault got the letters because he replied. So he wrote a really long letter. We were really happy that it was a personal letter, and he was answering personally, and he also mentioned their names in his reply. So, and I have to say that when we wrote to the old age care home, one of my students had a grandfather who was staying in that center, and he passed away 2 days after getting his letters. So the Prime Minister was aware of this, and he offered his sympathies to this student. So at that time, I would say that pretty much sums up what we have done up until here, because of course I'm trying to stay on time. But it was just to give you a brief overview of how we can, as a citizen, and as a teacher as well, how can we bring our class to think further up and to get engaged in their community even through COVID-19 times, so that we can get them engaged on their comments, their questions, their solutions, but also in the international scene, and with the intergenerational aspect as well, because a society has to include all generations and people from all walks of life. And I have to say that my parents have been very involved in these projects. They are solidary, and they come from all around the world. So there is this facility and this possibility that they have to help, to be generous, and to go towards each other, and it shows. it shows. I feel so blessed to have such amazing students and to work with amazing parents, because we can bring them to such a good place, because I think this is a collective effort that we have to do as a society in education. Thank you. Thank you, Tanya, for this testimony about your experience on the field and how you've been able to keep mobilizing your students and think of new initiatives through this difficult time. It's really inspiring to hear you. So thank you so much again. And I'd like to also thank all panelists for their presentations today. And we will now go to our Q&A session. We have a few minutes for this. And so we're gonna let Marta react firstly to Girma's comments about her presentation. And then I have a few questions that I have to ask the panelists, but we're gonna start with Marta.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much, Sebastian, and thank you very much, Girma, for your comments and suggestions. Actually, I do agree with you. There should be a balance between the individual and international organizations. My point is basically, or my critique is basically towards saying, we should pay more attention to governments and international organizations, because in most global citizenship education programs and definitions and reports, there is very little mentioning to all this, and this is the an study that we have been doing, my colleague Gustavo Fishman and myself, for some time, and this is one of the findings, and that's why we put more emphasis on this thing. But absolutely, I agree, we should involve youth or promote youth participation in social and global issues, and like the examples that Tanya, for example, was mentioning, about like how her students were involving or writing these letters to the government to ask them, hey, what have you been doing, and ask them all these questions. And this is absolutely interesting. That's exactly what I was talking about, because sometimes it is understood more like, oh, this is your problem, therefore you have to solve it. And well, we have to solve it in cooperation with governments and with international organizations. It is not only about individuals, and it's very important to keep this in mind, because it is part of this neoliberal trend of individualizing social problems, and that's why I would maybe be more again highlighting this point much more than the other one, but I agree absolutely that there should be a balance. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Martha, d'avoir réagi aux commentaires de Girma plus tôt aujourd'hui.
Thank you so much, Martha, who was reacting to Girma's comments. I want to ask a question to certain panelists. Girma first. I will switch to English because the question was asked in English.
Initiatives have been taking place to strengthen global citizenship education?
I think it's Maggie's question.
Yes, you can go ahead.
She wants, I think she wants specifically in what ways, in what mechanisms that the Canadian, I think, just the existence of new initiatives taking place to enhance global citizenship education. Just I feel that, for example, our organization is a Canadian organization, and the support that we all get from Canada. And previously there are experienced, particularly expat individuals who come here and support directly by getting into the classroom. They show their experiences, they share their experiences. But due to COVID-19, no individual can come here and share experience directly. But their support continues indirectly, because I think the individuals feel that these individuals are world citizens, and they feel that we need to help them directly or indirectly. When we cultivate these individuals to be good citizens, they can be good citizens of the world. So through us, that means through the organization employees, we closely support schools. We showed them how to protect themselves from COVID-19, how to learn despite COVID-19 is a bigger threat. So these kinds of specific initiatives are our experience, but we cannot move beyond this, so that we can create kinds of online platforms, because most of our schools are in rural areas, so there is no such kinds of online platform. But just we receive in kind and in monetary forms and in guidance. Some kind of guidance that should be implemented in our schools context. We receive such information and implement directly to our schools. This is something that we are doing now because of the problem of COVID-19. Maggie, if I got your idea.
Merci beaucoup, Guilma, pour cette réponse à Maggie.
Thank you, Germa, for this answer to Maggie. I will now go on to a question for Tanya, maybe two questions even. The first one was written under the Q&A section about the lessons you have learned to keep these exchanges going and to maybe inspire others to maybe oppose this method to other contexts, maybe to Anglophone schools. So what were the lessons that you learned through your projects and that you can share? And also somebody asked if you could talk a bit more about the solidarity kits. Yes, the solidarity kits come from one of the international collective, Valentin Bouloteau, who's originally from France. We take maybe 10 objects from home that we feel will be useful to somebody close to us. For example, when I suggested the activity to my daughters, they took maybe a water bottle, a blanket, that they wanted to give to homeless people that were living in the street not far from here. So at that time, they put it in our backpack. We put a blanket because it's cold here in Canada. In Montreal, it's pretty cold, even in the summer, even in the night. So we give them a toothbrush, water bottle, toothpaste, the comb for their hair, food like maybe applesauce that you can easily fit into your backpack. And so we had put that together, and we went to give this solidarity kit to help someone out, and the person was really happy. And we at first asked if they wanted it, and they said yes, really. And they were really, really happy, and they were like, oh, can I look in it? And they were really happy to find what was in the backpack. So this help was so easy to do. It could be an elder that lives around us. It could be a person living with cancer living in our neighborhood. It could be just cooking up small meals for a woman who just had a young kid, maybe a book to read, a bit of a break. It can be to help her in by bringing her some things that she might need. So these things are really easy to do, and you can do it all around the world because everybody knows somebody in their neighborhood. If we take a minute to look, there's always someone that could benefit from that help. So those are the solidarity kits that we thought about. And there was the second question, I think I forgot. Yes, apropos the first question, I didn't quite get it. Yes, it was a question from Maggie about what lessons have you learned through your projects that you'd like to share with everybody after having exchanged with schools in Africa, for example. Say we'd like to implement something similar in maybe schools, Anglophone schools in the rest of Canada. So what would be the lessons you'd like to share? Yes, the Carte des Altruistes is made up of citizens, so it's important not to have to ask for permission. It just makes everything so much simpler. If I wake up in the morning wanting to do something, then I just simply do it, and because it's good natured. We're not in a rigid system where we have to report back and do all this kind of thing. It's really a simple thing. But for me, it wasn't really complicated. I just contacted someone on LinkedIn. It was my friend living in Togo, and he said, "Oh, it would be great if our schools, when they open, it would be good that our Muslim kids at our school be open to other realities. So we don't have to ask for a million permissions. It's just in his classroom, he's autonomous, and you can make a link with anybody you like. So once the parents are in and the students are in, it just naturally happens. So maybe it's just a very simple thing. Contact someone on LinkedIn or Facebook and launch that relationship. Or if you want to join the Carte des Altruistes, you can come in or come out. You don't have to answer to anybody. You come whether you want it or not. I mean, you come when you want, and you don't when you don't want to. But it's just a fact to have that relationship with another province or another part of the world. And there are translations available now. A lot of international schools speak several languages. So it's easily attainable. I don't see it like a big obstacle, but all you need is somebody who's interested to do this with you, and then you can make a relationship. There's so many platforms now that we can connect on. COVID-19 has brought a lot of negative aspects, but a lot of positivity has come out too. So it helps us in better our use of internet and to open up on the world, even though in some parts we do close ourselves. So in education, it's the basis for all. And thank you everybody for your participation today. I know these are difficult times for teaching staff and for everybody. No matter where you are in the world, we are so thankful that you took the time to be here with us today. And also thank you to everybody who's going to listen to this conference later on in the following days. So thank you and have a great evening, everybody.